Chords. You've heard them before, but what are they? They're simply two or more notes played at the same time. Ah, yes, but two notes is technically a double stop. Ignore Professor C. He likes to prove his musical superiority by using big technical terms to confuse people, all of which aren't actually going to help you understand what we're talking about here. But why do some notes and chords sound great together and others sound, well? There's lots of answers to this question, but I think the easiest way to understand this and break this down is to go back to the major scale. If you're new to the major scale or not too familiar how it works, I've got a video I've done on that and I highly recommend you watch it before coming back to this video and continuing this. Now, the major scales you've seen is made up of 7 notes, and each one of the notes has a specific type of chord attached to it. We'll replace the note names with numbers, so 1 to 7. You'll see why later. But the question now should be, how on earth do we know what chord types go with what notes, and where did it even come from? Yes, well, it's all to do with the naturally occurring overtone series. That's enough, Professor C. So, when we take our major scale, the 7 notes of our major scale, we can make a chord simply by starting at one note, skipping the next note or missing the next note, and adding in the note after that. If you select 3 notes, you'll get a triad, which is just a fancy way of saying a 3-note chord. If you select 4 notes, you'll get a 7th chord. You can keep going, but that's not necessary for this video. Now, in order to learn the different types of chords, we need to get comfortable with the names for the different distances between notes, and that's what we call intervals. There's only 12 intervals before you get back to the same note. This is why viewing the musical alphabet as a circle rather than a line of notes or a keyboard makes this part easier to understand. For example, if you take a G major scale, skip a note and take the next note, you'll get a B. That distance is 4 notes, and that distance of 4 notes is a major third interval. So major third interval equals 4 steps around. So if you pick any note, go around clockwise 4 steps, 4 notes, you'll get your major third. Make sense? So if we add another note to our G, that will take us to a perfect 5th interval. So skip another note, take the note after that, and you're going to have your perfect 5th, which is a major chord. Root note, major third, perfect 5th. I have no idea why we call each interval what we do, so I'm sure someone's going to let me know in the comments, but that's just something you're going to have to get used to. Do the same again, and now we have a major 7th interval. All we have to do now is follow this out for the remaining 6 notes of our G major scale to get our different chords of the major scale. Follow the process through and you will get a minor 7th chord on the 2nd interval, on the 2nd note of the major scale. You'll get another minor 7 chord from the 3rd note. You'll get a major 7 chord from the 4th note. You'll get a dominant 7th chord from the 5th note, which is just a major chord with a flattened 7th instead of the major 7th. You get a minor 7 chord on the 6th note and a half diminished chord on the 7th note. Oh yes, the minor 7 flat 5, one of my favourite chords. As Professor C has said, this chord does go by another name, being a minor 7 flat 5. P.S. If you're curious about what a fully diminished chord is, let me know in the comments and I'll break it down in another video. Half diminished sounds like a big scary chord, but it's actually just a minor chord, but we take the 5th down 1 backward on the circle, so we flatten that 5th interval. That's not so bad now, right? You won't get this straight away. It will take time to sink in, so just try and get familiar with the idea of different chord types and this idea of intervals for distance between notes, and that each chord type has a different set of intervals that go with it. So just try to get a grip of the idea of chord types and the note patterns that make them up. So how do we use this information? How is this information useful to us as musicians? Well, let's say your MD calls a 3-6-7 progression. If we were in G, those notes would be F sharp, B and E. But what are the chord types? What chords are we actually playing over this? Well, as we saw earlier, the 7th note of a major scale has a half diminished chord attached to it, and the 3rd and 6th chord are both minor 7 chords. So they're both made up of root note, minor 3rd, perfect 5th and minor 7th intervals. Or flat 7th. If you focus your bass lines around these intervals on each chord, so the right intervals for the right chord, you're bound to hit the nail on the head when you're coming up with bass lines. These bass lines will actually then be able to move more with the music and take you away from purely just playing root and 5th your way through a service or song or session. There you go. Now you have a better idea, hopefully, of chords, how they work and where they come from. Of course, there are loads more chords built from different scales and different alterations, but this will provide you with a solid foundation you need to make sense of all the other stuff. As always, like and subscribe for more bass content, simple theory breakdowns, and life of a bass player, music lover. Stay bass clever.